Just Imagine, a podcast series by Imagine Theatre.
Yes, hello again and welcome to episode 125 of this podcast series for Imagine Theatre. And this time we start a brand new 4-part quarterly series looking at a year in the life of a producer.
For more information, go to their website at www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.
Now, in the last episode I was joined by the stage and screen actress who's appeared in everything from the most popular sitcoms and soaps to murder mysteries and movies. She's currently playing Judith Lloyd-James in the Madame Blanc mysteries on Channel 5 and is perhaps best known as Boyce's wife Marlene in Only Fools and Horses. That's Sue Holderness. This is just one of the many famous names we've spoken to on the series so far. We've also met all sorts of fascinating guests, from creatives and backstage team members to panto practitioners and academics. We've discussed lots of different aspects of the genre, from specific panto characters and titles to how pantomime is produced, its history and its future. Now, don't forget there's an index to all of the episodes so far on the Imagine website, and you can catch up with any you've missed so far where you normally get your podcasts. And while you're there, don't forget to subscribe to the series so that you don't miss any future episodes. So this time, I've been joined by Imagine's joint CEO, Business and Marketing Director Sarah Bowden, to begin a brand new series concentrating on a year in the life of a panto producer. How are you?
Good, Martin. How are you?
I'm really good, and this is an interesting one because we've talked about insights into the industry, but the life of a producer is something that most people don't even know. Even people in the business don't know.
Absolutely. I mean, we are a uniquely cyclical business that I think we touched upon before. There is no more cyclical than a panto producer. And we always get that, what do you do the rest of the year? I know, do you go on holiday for 6 months? I'm like, no, it's not. And we've touched upon so many times this whole what we do during the year and how the cycle works. And if we miss a cycle, if you miss something, you have to wait a full year to be able to redo it again. And so we thought it'd be really fun to take you through a typical year. It doesn't mean it's what every producer does. It doesn't mean it's necessarily what we do. Mm-hmm. It's an example of the kind of timelines that we could be working with here and what it might look like and the reasons why we don't do things when people think we should, for example.
So this is the first quarter of the year. We're talking about, from the end of the pantomime season through until the end of the financial year. So when the pantomimes have all closed, what's the first thing that happens here?
Apart from sleeping.
You don't have time to sleep at all.
No, do you know, and it's funny because everybody goes, oh, you must be really quiet now once we get into January, February. But the answer is it's as busy here as it is during the main season, probably up until the end of February. We start to feel it quieten down a little bit as we kind of go through February half term and into the end of February before it ramps back up again in March. But it's absolutely busy at this point of the year. And I always think people don't quite appreciate it. Have you had a holiday yet? No. Have you had a day off yet? No. But yeah, so we are just super busy because there is so much to be done to put everything away. And we'll obviously talk about all of the put-aways and what we have to do to tidy up and reconcile the shows and to do the settlements and getting everything ready and obviously initial marketing and things. So yeah, is it quiet? Well, we're recording this in the end of February. It's starting to get quiet now, Martin.
So the shows are closed. Obviously, the sets and costumes are coming back, and we touched upon this in a previous episode with you and Steve to sort of review the season. Once the stuff is all back in the building, then you're debriefing and talking to the venues and so on, looking at what went well, what could be improved and so on.
Yeah, it is, and it's a constant learning cycle. And again, this is the way that Imagine does it. It doesn't mean everybody else does it the same. They may have completely different methods, but January is put away and debrief month. So we have the team kind of divided in half, really. We have our operations department, the teams that look after the wardrobe and the props and the sets and the special effects and the fantastic team are out in the unit, putting everything away, checking it all back in. I think we've touched upon before, we have a barcoding system here where we scan things out of the building, we scan things back into the building. So obviously everything has to be scanned. We have to make sure that it's not broken. We have to make sure that it's come back as it should have done and all of that logging. And that takes a month to do, hanging up all the costumes, making sure that they've come back as we expect. Are all the shoes back? Are all the props back? All of that kind of thing. Because there's an awful lot of stuff. There's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of items. But we also have the producers, the associate producers team and the administration team and the senior management team who are debriefing with the venues. So we're spending a lot of time understanding what went well, what we can learn from the year, what maybe didn't go quite as successfully as we'd like, what our aims are for the following year. And so that takes the first part of January. For the debriefs, we then move on to a full team debrief where we lock ourselves away for 3 days and we just talk about the season just gone. We don't think about what's coming, we think about what's gone and what we felt really proud about, and there's huge amounts to be proud about, but also what lessons we can take in. And it's that debriefing every year which we feel is a critical part of the process, but it takes so much longer than you think. We also invite most of the creative teams to have part in that, so the directors, the choreographers, the musical directors, the production managers, the lighting designers, sound designers, everybody has a part of it because everybody's feedback counts and every bit of feedback is valuable.
And when we talk about feedback, obviously times have changed in recent years. You're now part of the Trafalgar Group. So do you have a debrief with Trafalgar, your parent company?
Yeah, absolutely. We follow the same process with them as we would with anybody else because ultimately we're there to provide a service to our partners within the business. So we produced 6 Trafalgar pantomimes this year. It's as important that they're debriefed as any of our other venues because we want to make sure that the product is the best that we can possibly put into each venue. So yeah, just because we're part of a group now doesn't change that process.
But are you accountable to the Trafalgar management in terms of how successful the year's been for Imagine and so on?
Oh, always, yeah. I mean, yeah, of course we are. And like any business, I say to everybody, so people say to me, you have the best job in the world. And I say, I genuinely do. I feel incredibly blessed to do what I do for a living. I'm so lucky. But we're still a business at the end of the day.
Yeah.
We just happen to have a sparkly output that's very special. But we still have to keep the tax man happy, the VAT man happy, health and safety happy, the finance happy. We still have budgets, EBITDA targets. We still have to reconcile and do all the settlements. And we still have to try and achieve financial targets. At the end of the day, there's a building over our head and salaries to be paid. And we're still fundamentally a business that has to sort all of that out. We just happen to have a very glittery product at the end of it all.
Okay, we'll talk about the reconciliation in a moment's time, but you talked about everything returning, sets, costumes and so on. Is maintenance done straight away or is it just logged and then left to be done later in the summer perhaps?
A mix of both, really. I mean, it will take a year for us to put it away properly and to check it all through and repair it and put it good. So if you take the scenic elements, for example, straight away they will log where the damage is. And then obviously if that's one of our own shows, then we will deal with it. If it's one of our hires, then obviously they have to be contacted to say there's been some damage sustained. We have to understand how that's happened, how we're going to put it good. But the putaways mainly create a log of work for the rest of the year. Mm-hmm. Costumes can't all be cleaned at once because we can't physically just chuck the costumes in a washing machine. They are very specialist. So they will take all year to get them cleaned. We just need to log that they're back with us and where we've put them. First load of dry cleaning went off last week, for example, and we'll have lorry loads of dry cleaning going off through the year. Again, what you can't do is send it all off in one go. It has to be sent off in batches. Same with wigs. Esther will get all the wigs back in here. She will log them. She will note the damage that's done on them, and then she will just meticulously work back through them all year. So it really is a year's cycle of getting everything ready, sending it out, bringing it back, cleaning it, getting it ready, sending it out. That's the cycle that we go through, but it takes a year, especially because we've got 45 plus sets in here. Well, you've got to get scenic artists in to repair, you've got to get things re-glittered, and you're not going to be able to do that all at once. Although the big difference of our new building is that we have got the space to repair and put good now, which was the problems that we didn't have in our previous building. So you'll see the repairing happening quicker. You'll see more scenic artists in here than you would have seen previously. But yeah, it's just it's an ongoing beast.
There's a difference obviously between upkeep and something that's damaged as well. Everything needs a certain amount of work every year to keep it up to standard. When something's damaged, it's probably a bigger issue. But every year you have to make a judgment call because you are getting new sets and costumes coming in every year. So you have to make a judgment call on maybe that's at the end of its life now. We need to get rid of that, whether it be set or a costume.
Yeah, and that's the kind of thing we would do at this time of year, is very much take that call. I mean, the luxury we have right now with the new building that we've moved into, that we've touched upon, means that we don't have to get rid of as much as we used to have to. It was a very different process in Brandon House, in our previous home, when we didn't physically have the storage for everything, so we had to make decisions what to throw out. We had to make decisions what wasn't worth repairing or what costumes had come to the end of their lives. not so much at the moment. But you're right, there's wear and tear will naturally happen as a set is out at the venues and it's being moved and the scenery is being moved and different sets are going in. It's going to get scuffed and it's going to get damaged, and that's completely normal. Sometimes, though, every so often on a lorry, unfortunately in transit, a rip can occur on some canvas or a bit of wood can break. These are the kind of typical things that we find coming back to us. And as you say, there's a very big difference between having to repair and having to just make good and maintain all the way through. So we, constantly got scenic artists in touching up, black outlining things, because in Pantoland, a black outline makes the world of difference. And you can literally, in October, November, December, see armies of scenics just black outlining to make things look fresh.
Yeah, I'm reminded of one particular Dick Whittington ship that was sunk over a period of years so many times. I think it reached the end of its natural life and had to be changed.
Oh yeah. I know exactly the ship you mean. Yeah, and it does. That's what happens. There's only so many times Cinderella's carriage can fly to the ball before it has to be replaced. There's only so many times a giant can come out of the castle and do what it does. They have a finite lifespan. If you look after them, they can last a long time, but eventually they will need replacing.
Okay, let's talk about the financial side at the end of a season then, in terms of reconciliation and so on. What's the priority? Because everybody in business always, or certainly self-employed people as well, think about the end of the financial year in April, but it's a year-round thing for you, isn't it?
It is, and it's really hard to explain our cash flow to the bank manager, because we kind of spend 11 months of the year getting everything ready. And apart from a few shows which run longer, the majority of the shows run between 3 and 4 weeks. A couple of them a little bit longer. So we earn our money in that space of time. And so it's really hard to explain to the bank. Yes, it will all come in at once, and then we'll spend it slowly through the year, and then we'll go back around the cycle again, and then it'll all come in at once, and then we'll spend it really slowly through the year. And the number of times you take a phone call from the bank to say, oh, we can see you've got X amount of money in the bank. Would you like to invest it for 2 years? And you think, no, because it doesn't work like that. And that's the bit that's really hard to explain to people is we're looking at the January to March period right now, and we've completed the shows at this point, but we haven't necessarily been paid for them. And this is always the interesting bit for those who are finance-minded. If you can imagine that we've paid out all of this money, we haven't necessarily had it back. You can appreciate that we're begging theatres to pay us at this point, because this is always the hairy bit for cash flow. We're used to it. We're totally ready for it. We know exactly what to do with it, but that's the nature of it. The cash flow is extreme at the moment.
And on the accounting side, once you've actually finished the season and you're still waiting for maybe quite a few of the payments to come in from the venues, talk us through that process. What happens between the end of the run and you completely reconciling everything?
So obviously there will be costs incurred in the venues, and there's a deal that's been agreed with each venue, and the box office will come in. It will have all of its deductions taken off the top. So those deductions are typically ticketing fees, PRS, credit card fees, and those kind of things. And that leaves us with what we would call a producer's gross. So producer's gross is the box office less all the fees. We then obviously net that down and take the VAT off the top, and then we do a split of the box office between the producer and the venue. That's the normal stuff. On top of that, we've got the fees such as get-out fees that we have to pay to get the show out of the venue, get-in fees to pay to get the show into the venue. There may be some running costs for crew during the run. We have to pay to do laundry, we have to pay for marketing, have to pay for outreach performances, audio descriptions and signers and things like that. And the list goes on. Security we have to now pay for. Now Martin's Law has come in post the event in Manchester, so now there are security requirements that there weren't before. So all of these fees come off the top, and then we sit down with the venue and we say, yes, we're happy, or no, we're not happy, and then we obviously negotiate. And that can take 6 to 8 weeks to sort out. We then settle on what we're happy the amount to be. We then invoice, and then the venue then pays us. There are some venues that are super brilliant, are getting their settlements to us within a couple of weeks of the Panto closing. So they might get their settlement to us by, for example, the 20th of January. If there's no dispute on that settlement, we won't see the money until the 20th of February. But if there is a dispute on that and we have to go backwards and forwards, the time pushes on. There are some venues which have only just sent their settlements to us, and that's 6 weeks after Panto closed. We then have to see whether there's an agreement or a disagreement. And then there's another 4 weeks until we're paid.
So you're chasing the clock, really?
Absolutely, you're chasing the clock. So as a cash flow model, you have to be able to plan to get through the panto season and a number of weeks post-panto season before the money starts to come back in again. And it's always this little bit that's really tricky. As I say, as panto producers, we're used to it, but this is the bit that maybe those who are listening don't realise that there's this really cyclical. There are elements of pull downs against box offices that come through in the autumn, but some venues will and some venues won't. But it certainly isn't enough to cash flow the season. You have to be able to manage your cash flow. You have to know how you're going to do that. And really, that's ultimately what myself and the finance team do. As we've often said, haven't we? Steve and I are the joint CEOs. It's not quite as clean as him doing show and me doing business, but it's not far off it.
Multiply this by 20 odd times, because that's how many shows you have, how many venues you're dealing with, and that's pretty time consuming, isn't it?
It is, and again, that's when people say to us, "What's happening?" And do you go straight on holiday? No, no, because with the debriefs and the settlements and the budgeting for the following year and the early marketing for the following year, we can't stop. I mean, we're due our holiday in the second week of March. We haven't had a break for months and months and months now. That's the nature of what we do. That's how it is. But it does drain you at this time of year. It tends to be when the panto producing fraternity gets quite poorly.
Well, let's talk about something else then, because that's the shows that you produce for venues. In terms of the financial aspect of all the leases, the hires of costumes and sets and so on, is that a little easier?
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously worked in a different way in that they're invoiced for what they use and what they hire. So the cash flow works very differently on those. We're just now identifying who we're going to be hiring to for next year, and that's managed completely differently. There are no settlements at the end, unless, as we touched upon a minute ago, there's damage that's happened. Yeah. And sometimes there's damage that's occurred or something that's gone missing, and therefore we have to chase and we have to really get on top of that.
And in terms of the transit of the sets and costumes and so on, because from the moment it's left the venue to the time it gets back here, whose responsibility is it? Once it's in the lorry, is it yours, and is that therefore insured? Yeah,
I mean, in terms of a hire, it's ultimately the responsibility of the hirer until it returns to this door.
Right.
So if the moment it leaves here to the moment it arrives back, it's the hirer's responsibility. If it's our own show, it's our own responsibility throughout. So again, there's all those complications of insurances and legalese that you have to think about. Who is responsible? Who's managing it? Have we got a copy of their insurance certificate? Do we know what they've insured it for? You think about that. What would happen if a lorry went missing? Either on the way there or on the way back, a lorry that had got a full pantomime set and costumes and everything else in it. What would happen? How would we manage that? What scenario is that? And so these are the kind of things that people don't realise we have to have a business continuity and disaster management plan behind the scenes of what if, goodness me, please don't let it happen, but what if, the set for Reading was to go missing, for example, on the way down there, or the lorry was to be involved in an accident and we had a total loss of the production. How do we manage that? All of these logistics have to be planned.
Yeah, and there are some things that you can't entirely plan for. Every show, company manager, DSM, whoever, will have a budget, petty cash if you like, because there will be costs that are incurred that you couldn't have predicted. All that's got to be reconciled as well, hasn't it?
Oh gosh, yeah. Petty cash reconciliations have always been interesting. Much easier now that we have introduced a card payment system. So the company manager is given a card now with cash on it that they have to reconcile as they're going along. So that whole process is so much easier than when we used to wait for it to come back as a pile of receipts and we used to have to manage it. So we've overcome a lot of the administration headaches from that, thanks to the fact that we can put prepayment cards in place for everybody. But yeah, things take so much longer than you realise. Not just that, but we have tax claims to do. We have to keep calculating our month ends every month, and month end is really hard when you've paid out all the money but you're still waiting for it to come in, because you're trying to predict on a month end return when a venue might settle with you. But if they're late getting the settlement to you, even though you know the money is coming in, you can accrue for it in some ways, but you have to make sure the cash flow works as well as the accruals working. And keeps us on our toes, Martin.
Yeah, so you've done 2 of those month ends already.
We have, yep. So, yeah, we did, well, December's month end obviously was in the middle of the panto season.
Yep.
That's always a fun one when you're trying to calculate how many of your panto performances have matured and how many haven't, and therefore what you think your share of box office is going to be on the maturity front. So we've got this big calculator that calculates it all for us. And then obviously January's brings to the end, and February's, well, February month end is now.
Yeah.
So we're doing that month end now. Still waiting for a few settlements, Martin.
Whoever you are, get your finger out. Let's look ahead then, because I know it's only the start of the year, the first quarter, but we talk about this all the time, don't we? You've been planning next Christmas for 6 or 7 months already, but in January and February, March, and maybe in the start of April, there's a lot of things that need to be sorted out in terms of organising audition dates and maybe even photo shoots and so on, isn't there?
Yep, so we did our first photo shoots of the year in January this year because we knew some of our casting. Obviously, we go into the previous season knowing the production that we're going to do the following year, knowing almost certainly the set and costumes that we're putting onto it and props and special effects, knowing cast sizes, knowing artwork, dates of runs, ticket pricing. So all of these elements are already fixed before we go into the previous year's panto. And that's the elements that we really have to start to hone in on, locking. Have we got the right cast sizes? Who is it going to be? Who are our returners? Who do we want to bring in? Have we got the right scenic elements? Who's going to write the show? How are we going to manage that element of it? Who's going to create the show? What music are we using? All of these conversations are already actively underway whilst we're still putting away the season before. And I think we've said before, it's an 18-month cycle. It very much starts kind of September, October of the year before and finishes in the February, March of the year after. And it's an 18-month cycle. But that does mean for 6 months of the year, you're working on 2 lots of pantomimes. You know what's happening in the current season, you know what's going to happen in the future season.
So at the moment then, you are organising who the creatives will be at each venue. You already know the titles. Ticket pricing is pretty much set because, of course, tickets have been on sale from the previous panto run and so on. But pricing is something you ought to keep your head around all the time because things can change, can't they?
Oh, they do. And we typically set the ticket pricing in the October of before. So we're talking 14 months before the show happens. You have to set your initial ticket pricing, and you only know part of the picture at that point. You know where you are at that point in time, but so many elements can change. We don't know what inflation's going to do. We don't know what the taxman's going to do. VAT has changed in the past. It's been 15%, 17.5%, 20%, and VAT elements do make up a chunk of that ticket price. We've also got the new CMA ruling in this year where you can't charge post-decision transaction fees. You have to wrap the transaction fees into the ticket pricing. So what we're finding is, as well as having to consider the inflationary impact on ticket pricing this year, we're having to consider the fact that what used to be, for example, a £4 transaction fee or booking fee after you'd gone through the booking phase now has to be wrapped into the actual ticket price. So there might be £1.50 on a ticket, £2, £1 on a ticket, which looks like an increase in ticket price, but it isn't. It's purely that transaction fee being wrapped in. And you have to be very conscious of the fact that psychologically that makes a difference to when it hits the consumer, and they'll feel like the ticket price has risen even though the collective price of their basket may not have changed. So there's so many elements to it we have to think, and I think the thing we emphasise is that we tend not to put ticket pricing on anything anymore. In the old days you used to look at a flyer and it had all the ticket prices broken down. We tend to put a QR code on there now, and I would emphasise the fact that tickets can go down as well as up. It's very unusual that they will go down because the cost of the shows is what the cost of the shows is, and the ticket pricing is set based upon the budget of the production. But sometimes we listen to the market if we can, and there will be elements that we can make changes on. So that's a big change that you may have seen moving forwards, is that there's not the breakdowns of schedules or the breakdowns of pricing on artwork and in brochures and in flyers that there used to be. And that's to allow us that little bit more flexibility to move with the times. But also if we suddenly see that VAT goes up to 25%, for example, we're going to have to make a change to ticket pricing. If VAT goes down, we can bring our ticket pricing down. And all of these things, and you don't know that 14 months in advance.
I think there's a real responsibility on venues, box office staff and on websites now to explain that, because I don't think that's been publicised enough. And for those people who buy tickets, they may see an increased price and think, I'm going to still have to pay the booking price. And of course, you never saw that until you'd actually booked or, arranged for the ticket. So it needs to be really clear information, doesn't it, to make sure that people realise what the change means.
Absolutely, and we're working closely with a lot of our venues to say, a lot of venues had already wrapped it up before, so there won't be a change. If you take the Trafalgar venues, it wasn't wrapped up, it was a transaction fee, but I know they're working really hard to make it clear at the time of booking that actually this isn't us putting the prices up by £1.50, £2, whatever. This is us doing what the CMA ruling is asking us to do. Mm-hmm. It will become the norm. Give it a couple of years. We'll see differences in the way that prices of flights are presented, in the way that prices of, if you go into Uber Eats and you buy your food, they can no longer add all of these fees at the end anymore. It all has to be wrapped in at the start. We'll get used to it. It's just, it feels like a big change in what is already a cost of living crisis.
Well, we've dispelled a myth, because whenever anybody talks about prices, everybody always says things like, well, it's crazy, isn't it, how they always go up but they never go down. Now you know they can go down as well. Let's talk about the auditions then, because you've said that some castings have been done already. There will be people who return to shows and you can do the publicity for that. But in terms of, the other members of the cast, you need to have bookings already really for audition spaces and dates to do that, don't you?
Yeah, and that's part of the process that's done in this January to March period, is that we very much look at what the cycle of the year is going to look like. When are we going to go out for audition? When are we going to open our audition window? When are we going with auditions? When do we want to do the main marketing pushes? When do we want to get our stage managements in place? When are we going to get the celebrity casting announced? Yeah. So there's kind of, there's a timeline of the year. And you could argue, you can just repeat the same cycle over and over. But it's amazing how much it varies from year to year. And you have to listen to the timeline and you have to react to the live data in front of you.
Is there any truth in the rumour that Laura's already been in touch with Donald Trump to see if he's available for next season?
Oh, it's a beautiful world and it's beautiful and he's beautiful. He'd be beautiful in panto.
I think he's comedy gold, if you ask me, but there you go. What about, finally, other venue discussions in terms, obviously the dates of performances and so on are always arranged around school holidays and stuff like that. Is that already set in stone?
Absolutely, yeah. The dates are set in stone because obviously we have to get all the clearances for the children's licensing dates. Martin, you know this from being a performer yourself. There are some schedules which fall really kindly and there are some which are not so great. We're starting to move into the not so great dates. Mm-hmm. We're starting to move into Christmas Day being on a Saturday and Christmas Day being on a Sunday and Boxing Day. And these are always the trickier dates. In an ideal world, Christmas Day on a Tuesday or a Wednesday is lovely. Yep. Those are your dates that you really enjoy. You get a good amount of time after the schools have broken up, but before the panto, which is when people want to come. So it's so we're just starting to now, as well as looking at this year's dates, you have to start looking at what you're going to be doing moving forwards and what your patterns are going to be, making sure that we have to think about the working time directive. Have we given everybody the right amount of days off? Have we given the right amount of breaks? All of these elements, and these are all things we go back and sanity check again at this time of year, because we did stuff in October. Now let's really lock it in and make sure we've got it right.
And is there any other discussion to be had with venues at this time? Even things like, I don't really know who is in charge of merchandising, whether that's a venue, whether you have a say in that. Is that something you discuss?
We tend not to have a say in merchandising, but certainly merchandising and secondary sales are a critical part of consideration for a panto producer because the venues rely on them so heavily. Mm-hmm. So I remember one venue saying to us, is there any chance that we could just knock that evening performance half an hour later? Because if I go half an hour later, I'll double the amount of beer I'll sell. Mm. Well, of course we can go half an hour later because everything, the ticketing income, the secondary sales, the box office income, all of these elements are what ensures the future of venues. Mm-hmm. And without the future of venues, we don't have a job. Yeah. It's our job, as well as putting the shows on stage to entertain the audience, it's our job to make sure that the theatre survives too.
So you have nothing to do with the sparkly wands?
Not me.
Well, listen, it's the first of a series. Absolutely fascinating so far. We'll pick up the story again in the summer. But for the time being, Sarah, thank you for talking to us.
Thanks for having us, Martin.
And that's it for now. Don't forget to subscribe through your favourite podcast app and join me, Martin Ballard, next time for episode 126, when I'll be talking to the BBC Radio 2 and television presenter Richie Anderson, who made his panto debut in Leicester for Imagine last Christmas.
Thank you for listening to the latest edition of Just Imagine, the podcast series from Imagine Theatre. And you can find out more by going to www.imaginetheatre.co.uk.